IDC Radio,
בינתחומי.
106.2 FM.
הרדיו הבינתחומי.
IDC Radio, in collaboration with כל ישראל.
106.2 FM.
Special interviews, highlights, and live broadcasts.
So I'm John Spencer, and the chair of Urban Warfare Studies at the Modern War Institute, which is in West Point, New York. I'm joined, really excited to be joined by Mr. Joe Vega, who's works for the Asymmetric Warfare Group in the U.S. Army and is probably the only subject matter expert that I know. There might be others that I know on underground warfare, and really excited to have Joe at the Subterranean Challenges in War and Peace Conference here in Herzliya. Joe, thanks for coming, and could you give us a little bit of background on how you became the guy?
Sure, John. First of all, thanks for having me. Back in 1990, during the first Gulf War, we discovered a chemical plant, which was disguised as a mill factory. So obviously through ISR and our special reconnaissance, we were able to locate it and destroy it. And so what happened after that is the enemy realized that we have superior capabilities when it comes to ISR, and they started hiding amongst the people in the cities and underground. Obviously, if they're hiding underground, we can't see them from the sky. As we started seeing this pattern more and more, and because of the fear of weapons of mass destruction, we decided we might as well set up a team back in the special ops community.
Yep.
To not only locate but be able to destroy these capabilities. For that, we had to go into tunnels. So it started initially with small tunnels, and they got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I've been working this since 1991. Most of it was all classified, and within the last few years, the Army has realized that the special ops community cannot handle everything that's out there.
Yeah, talk to me about that. I know that I know not to ask you about the kind of the special mission, and every military usually has special forces that do get trained for every environment, to include the underground and entering military underground facilities, going down. Talk about the tunnel rats of Vietnam, but the U.S. Army kind of got interested from a big army, what we call big army. Everybody needs to be prepared. Initiative. And can you walk us through that?
We were looking at North Korea, and we were looking at what are the capabilities. It's no secret that North Korea has really over 5,000 deep underground facilities. If you think about those 5,000, let's say 400 are selected targets that the U.S. Army needs to actually enter, and it might not be destroy everything, but at least take them out of function. Out of those, let's say out of those 400, there's 40 that, again, this is hypothetical.
Yeah.
Let's say there's 40, 1% that contains chemical materials, hazardous materials that can create mass casualties. So that's 40. The troops that we have trained in the special operations community can only handle a handful.
Yeah.
So you think about, even if they were to handle the 40, who is going to go into the other 360? So the Army realized, you know what, we better start, actually JSOC said we better start distributing this information to other parts of the general purpose forces. So we started with 82nd, we started with the 10th Mountain Division, we started 101st to see what their capabilities are. What was generic to the organization, organic to the unit when it came to capabilities, equipment, enablers that they could use, and we realized that they just didn't have the capabilities. So we made a list of equipment that needed to be purchased throughout the Army, and we went back and we trained them. We set up it was initially a 3-day course for the staff, training the staff how to plan, not so much how to do MDMP and how to plan, but what are the logistical nightmares that they're going to encounter for this type of mission. Because it's very resource intensive. So if I can't get in there, how am I going to get in? Are we jumping in? Is it an air assault? Are we driving in? How do I get all the equipment that I need? If I have exothermic torches, how do I jam the bottles? How do I get O2 into my breathing apparatus. So naturally, they didn't like what they heard. We also developed a 5-day course for the tactical units, and we trained all the leadership.
So that's like the infantry guys you're going to send down there.
Infantry guys we will send down. So we were training company commanders, first sergeants, platoon leaders, squad leaders. And what we did was we formed them into squads. We wanted to know what it felt like to be a squad and go underground. And by doing this, then they would know how to lead their troops.
Okay.
They realize themselves that it's hard work. It could take anywhere between 40 minutes on some of these tunnels, and some of these tunnels have taken us up to 10 hours, 12 hours. I personally have been 17 hours underground before, between breaching and clearing an underground facility.
So was some of this kind of, let's say, momentum or focus on underground warfare driven by other factors such as it showing up on the battlefield more and the urban warfare aspect? Not that would make me happy or anything as an urban warfare scholar, but was it driven by what we're seeing on the battlefields today?
It was driven mostly by the threat of North Korea at first.
Okay.
But the more and more we saw these types of facilities being built throughout the world, and we saw experts flying to different countries. I'll tell you right now, the Norwegians are the best builders of deep underground facilities.
I did not know that.
So if you see a large group of civil engineers, Norwegians in the airport somewhere, you can kind of say, let's see what are they doing. But and the other thing was General Milley stating that the next combat operation will be a large-scale combat operation in a mega city.
Okay.
Now, mega cities, obviously cities with over 10 million people, all have some type of tunnels. And most of the tunnels, though used by civilians, can be converted into military type C headquarters, C2. They can just organize them. They can use them to consolidate, regroup, resupply, and high munitions.
Yeah, I remember some of that conversation that as the Army was looking at mega cities, and but let me ask them what I call the $1 million question, and there's no other person that can answer this correctly. For a specially trained soldier, a regular member of the Army, what makes underground so hard?
The truth is just not knowing what to expect right now. When we first started, same thing. I'm not afraid to say or ashamed to say that the way we learned was by failure. We tried different things and we failed and said, okay, how do we defeat this? How do we conquer these things? Believe it or not, here, we're in special social ops. We have a team of 70 guys, all big strapping dudes. We're down underground. Before I know it, the guys next to me are passing out. I'm laughing. Look at these guys, how weak. And before I know it, I pass out. And what we didn't understand was all the different challenges. So air quality is the first thing.
Air quality.
And
okay.
we realized, we have to get air monitors. Before we knew it, we were in full MOP 4 gear.
Oh, man.
Now, MOP 4 doesn't protect you against everything. So then we had to develop different kits. And we went with what's now being issued as the Dr. Scope kit, which is pretty much a different type of protective uniform. But the mask, we use PAPRs and then use an SCBA or breathing apparatus type system. Once you get used to it, you can probably last in that suit for about an hour or with air. And then you have to recharge your bottles. Excuse me. So the problem is when you take all that equipment that the regular Army is not used to, first of all, a guy that's not used to training with a breathing apparatus is only going to last 20 minutes.
Okay.
So what does that tell me? When I plan now, I have to, if I was planning on 50 bottles, now I have to multiply that by maybe 4 or 5 because these guys are going to be switching off more and more. Obviously, when the guys run out of air, they're going to come out. So now I need another element to take the lead. So you got to kind of leapfrog them every once in a while. That way you don't burn one team out. They also realize that the breaching part is hard. There's no you can do an initial breaching explosives, and once you're down, then it's how do you breach. Most of it is mechanical breaching. We do burn with exothermic torches, but when you do that, once again, you have to kind of poke a hole first, try to get an air reading once on the other side of the door, and then you have to use your breathing apparatus while you're cutting, because if not, obviously fire consumes the O2, and the guys will start passing out. Another thing that we learned as we were kind of cutting metal underground and not knowing what was happening.
You shared with me though about what will happen to some people if they don't know they're claustrophobic and they enter a dark where all your senses start to go away.
Roger. So confined spaces is one. We build confined space training apparatus. It's just small tunnels, and we put guys in there. We can move in different ways so the guys don't learn what they, say, okay, I remember how to get in, how to get out. And it's totally dark. You're in a confined space, probably 3x3. So you can imagine me, how bad I felt in there. And you have to feel your way. And it's just, once you feel, and it has different layers until you come out the other side. That one is pretty bad. I'll say so myself. It's intensive, and you want to get out of there as soon as you can. But after you do it several times, you get used to it.
The familiarity.
But there's some people that when they're in total dark will get vertigo, will not know where up and down is. And those guys, obviously, there's nothing you can do about that. Some people say, you can use some of the patches behind the neck, right? But it just throws you completely off. Those guys will fall down, they'll pass out. When you're in some of the tunnels that we've been in that were had water in them and maybe a soft surface on the side, same thing. The noise reverberates, it bounces off, and again it throws you off, so you don't know what's going on. A lot of those. Another thing is any weapon that you fire is multiplied, so the decibels are multiplied. So it's not just ear protection; it's really ear protection and blast overpressure. So just a matter of firing a weapon underground, that overpressure is going to get to you after a while. Yeah. So again, and that's one of the reasons why you have to make sure you have enough. And that's the thing, you can't just take a small squad and say we're going to clear this whole thing. It's really a company-sized operation because you have to continuously replace people in and out because they just can't last.
Huh.
Imagine being in MOP 4 for 17 hours in an underneath structure, and obviously we can drink water, but you can't eat. How do you go to the bathroom? So it makes you appreciate the commercials for adult diapers.
Yeah. For anybody that doesn't know, MOP 4 is a chemical suit that you wear, and you don't get out of it once you're in it.
Yes.
Based on basically you're saying that in some underground environments that the air quality is so low, the threat of other contaminants is so high. I mean, it sounds like in some circumstances this can be a very, very dangerous space to enter.
It is. Now, soldiers are resilient, and they will adapt. And the more you do it, the more you'll realize that your TTPs that exist today and the SOPs that you have within your own units, they will work underground. It's just, again, because it's a different environment. And that's all it is, an environment. And I tell people, do you really change your TTPs when you fight in the jungle versus the desert? Do you change your TTPs when you fight in the Arctic versus an urban area? They're pretty much the same. Now, the equipment changes that you need, and the clothing changes. So it's the same thing. For me, Subterranean is just an environment, a different environment, and I just need to know what are the resources I need, how can I utilize them to be the most effective, but the SOPs, the TTPs, clearing rooms, they all stay the same.
So would you recommend, not that this is a loaded question, but it sounds like some of the challenges of entering the underground could be mitigated with just exposure, soldiers being exposed to it. Exposure,
and then the equipment needed. Now, I always like to train the units with what's organic to the unit and their own enablers, because if, let's say we do have a large-scale combat operations in Mega City, there's tunnels everywhere. Well, not everybody's going to have the specialized equipment. The specialized equipment is really for the deep underground facilities where we may have the threat of weapons of mass destruction or some chemical products. So regardless if you have that equipment or not, everybody has to learn. In the last 2 years, we trained 28 brigades on how to fight underground. Now, some of the challenges are how do we keep them proficient?
Yeah.
How do we continue that training so that they don't lose? Because it is a perishable skill. If you don't do it continuously, some of the TTPs or the use of some of the equipment, you will lose it. You have to be proficient at cutting with an atomic torch. You have to be proficient at breaching, mechanical breaching, ballistic breaching, shotgun breaching, and like I said, thermal breaching. Explosive breaching, we set up a course. It was called MTT Charlie. We traveled throughout the different units and taught them how to do explosive for Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 doors.
Okay.
Class 4 is for the Tier 1s.
So that for anybody, that's a really thick door.
Yes, it's a big door that you would see in like an ASP or something like that. But the thing with the explosives is, again, it comes to a point where the Army, again, doesn't teach beyond. So we went back to JSOC, and JSOC actually declassified some of the charges that we had developed for some of these doors. And what we did was we went to TRADOC, told them needs to be a course that we can teach to the engineers. So we set up a specialized deliberate breaching course, it's called, at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, at the engineer school. It's a 10-day course, and it teaches them how to go beyond just the level 1 and 2.
Yeah, 'cause I think you remind us that as we think through this, and especially at this conference, we think about encountering tunnels, sending military forces down there if that's what you're going to do. It is specialized in different communities. An engineering unit will have different equipment and need to have different training than the infantry guy who might have a different mission. It goes.
Roger. So there's two enablers that the units really need. That's the chemical, the CBRN personnel, which unfortunately we haven't trained with CBRN for the last 17 years, and then the engineers. Those are two key elements, enablers that without those you're not going to gain access. You're probably not going to be able to get your air monitors or readings, and they have the equipment to go underground, and they have the breathing apparatus. They have the Dr. Scope kits. The engineers will have all the breaching equipment. Now, we went to the PM for the engineers, PM Scott, and we actually told them what needed to be developed, and they developed what they call the urban breaching kits. So every BEB,
big engineering unit.
So an engineering battalion, so that belongs to the brigade. So Brigade Engineering Battalion has those kits. Unfortunately, most of the infantry brigades or the battalions within the brigades don't know that they're there, that they exist. So we have to go to units and expose them to what's organic to the unit, what the engineers have, what their enablers have. Believe it or not, we have to expose them to the engineers, the chemical, and what the CBRN guys and what they have. Even the dogs, dog handlers and MPs. Most of the infantry battalions don't even realize that every brigade has a company of MPs that's attached to them.
With dogs.
With dogs.
Yeah, and dogs are, I mean, it's kind of popular media. Dogs are a tool for the underground.
I throw a dog in there every time. As soon as I open that door, if the air quality is good, we throw the dog in. I've lost, throughout my career, I've lost 25 dogs. But I'd rather lose 25 dogs than 25 soldiers. At least I don't have to go to the mother pup and explain why her puppy died.
Right.
The other thing is, we tried to develop a protective mask for the dog, so if their air quality wasn't bad, we could still throw him in.
Yeah, didn't go well.
The thinking process was, I could put a camera on him, throw him in. Robots are good, and you have to use robots, but a robot is only going to see where I send them. Whereas the dog is going to detect a person, he's going to smell him, and he's going to go to him, and then he's going to do his job. Unfortunately, it was a mask, and we tried to develop some, but he lost a sense of smell. So, just say, okay.
Problematic.
So if the air quality is good, we'll send him in. If not, then we'll send a team in with SCBAs. We'll send a robot first, and then a team.
It's really interesting that sometimes soldiers just don't know, or units, or leaders, or military forces just don't know what they have available to help them in that environment. So my last question, and I think we've talked about this before. So I didn't listen to Joe Vega. The U.S. Army didn't listen to you, didn't continue the training, didn't continue to prepare for the underground. But there I am, in an urban area, and there is underground. What do I have available, or what should I at least think about when I'm heading down?
So it's okay. It's okay to use your tack light.
Okay. Yeah. White light.
Most people think, oh, I'm gonna have to be in the dark completely. If you have no night vision devices, or even in some instances, you're better off with light than without it.
Because some people don't realize night vision doesn't work, and if there's no ambient light.
If there's no ambient light, there's no way your nods are gonna work. Now, what we did is we developed and system the purchase of what's called the Cody. The Cody is a thermal lens that can be adapted to the scope on your nods.
Yep.
So now you have both the night vision device with ambient light, and you have your thermal. You can use them both simultaneous, which is pretty good because I can see just about everything, and I can see the form of the person. And then if I lose all ambient light, then I can turn up my Cody and just see the thermal.
But when in doubt, use white light.
When in doubt, use white light.
Okay.
and just keep on moving. Don't. We always say surprise, speed, and violence of action. Well, I tell the guys, once you're in, surprise is gone.
Yep.
And speed, yes, it just means keep maneuvering, keep moving, but move fast, but move with control. You don't want to move so fast that you lose control, because obviously if you don't know if there's more than one drift, hallways we call drift, and now you get divided, the worst thing you want is to lose somebody in a tunnel and not be able to find them.
Yeah.
There's TTPs to
tie each other together.
Yeah, we're not tied, but like we'll say we're always going to move right, hold left. So what does that mean? If I come to a Y intersection, I'm always going to move to the right, to the right, to the right, and I'll put 2 personnel for security on that left side.
Okay.
The other thing is you lose comms.
Yep.
So whenever
because radio signals don't work underground.
So whenever I do a 90-degree angle, if, we're using MPU-5 radios, which create a mesh network, but now I have to keep 2 guys at that intersection. So you can imagine, if I get a lot of 90-degree turns, at what point do I run out of people? Because they're all pulling, they're conducting the mesh network for me. So
Probably need a compass.
Mapping. That's one of the things that we really are working, struggling on, is to create the Prometheus effects. I don't know if you saw that movie.
Yes,
where
I've
they throw
seen
the
it,
little thing.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying with drones to create that, and we can talk about it later. But there's some success, but a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So right now it's old school. It's a guy with a compass, counting pace.
Yep.
And say, okay, I'm going, north, 100 meters, and then I turned east. So
I can imagine it's easy to. I think one of the psychologists talked about you can not only get vertigo and lose sense of what's up and down, you can lose a sense of time down there.
Yes, because obviously there's no sense of daylight, there's no sense of time, and the longer you're there, the more you lose sense of how long have I been down here.
That's crazy.
So that's how you end up with 17 hours on the ground.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I really appreciate your time, and I don't know of any other expert. I hope we should keep our eye on this challenge, because I don't think it's going away, especially in urban areas. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. As I said, it was an honor to be here.